how did you absorb the entire macro conversation, societal and otherwise, as America has a gender fight on its hands headed into an election, of everything that happened in Cleveland on Sunday, the calamity from start to finish that includes his teammates rushing to his defense because, of course, that's what football players are going to do, even though it is totally tone deaf.
Yeah, it certainly has been one of the harder stories to cover for sure, just because everything about it just feels, it just has this blemish of the backstory. And I still have a hard time understanding why Deshaun Watson has yet to even really talk to anyone, any media outlets, sit down with you guys, sit down with me, sit down with someone, and maybe apologize, maybe talk about this journey for him. Because I think what's lacking here is any understanding of what it's been like for someone like him. We immediately are criticizing because we know of all these situations, right? Like you just painted the picture of what we've seen him go through. And he just hasn't shown remorse. And I think that's really been at the center of the problem. In terms of the fandom against him, things that I've always been told is, well, winning fixes everything. If they won, none of this would be a problem. They would be cheering for him and they would look past all these issues. And then we see when they don't win, how the reaction is. And that booing, I know you said that has to do with football. I actually disagree with you. I think the booing was because I don't think Cleveland has ever wrapped their arms around Deshaun Watson. I don't think that situation was ever something the Browns fans really, truly were signing off on. I could also tell you there were people in that building that weren't always comfortable with that signing and with that contract and with how that all came together. It's why a lot of teams that were definitely in on him that wound up, losing because they weren't willing to give him that guaranteed money. There's another side of that story where I know teams that, they would love the Deshaun Watson quarterback that we saw in Houston, but they weren't comfortable with the situation and the things that he was being accused of. So look, I think, I spoke to Jimmy Haslam at the owners meeting last week and people associated with the Browns to just kind of get an understanding of how they are looking at the season. And, they always just say the same thing right now, which is it's not all on Deshaun. Everybody's got to be better. But this is also the same organization who decided not to bring Joe Flacco back, knowing that Deshaun Watson needed to be put in a space that was going to sort of give him that confidence that the organization was behind him without any distractions, without any competition.
To think that even before this season, when he had proven to be a failure as a quarterback because he's been bad the entire way, you're still giving Deshaun Watson personnel power. Aaron Rodgers got run out of Green Bay for not having personnel power. Deshaun Watson gets to choose who his backup is, and it ruins their season?
The result of the contract is forced this team to try to put him in a lane to succeed at all times with no guardrails either at this point. So look, when they made that decision, there was a part of me that understood it. They need to make this work. They have to give Deshaun everything he needs to be successful. And if getting Joe Flacco out of there was going to help the psyche, I can see the argument. But if this organization wants to win,
but Diana, the reason this one's so interesting to me, because you're talking about helping the organizational psyche, and this very clearly is a player who was great at quarterback in his athletic prime, who has been short-circuited and cannot play football because of whatever his life has been for the last 3 years. Again, not a victim of his own creation, of his own circumstance. We've rarely seen a player that this great short circuit, at least in part, because he's been changed by the last 3 years of everyone knows, Stugatz, this part, the details. Oh, that dude at the center of the stadium likes to call women like they're Ubers and then put his ass up in the air and be like, here are my balls, do this and that, and like very aggressively using his power on women all over, allegedly, the area wherever he was, to do this kind of preying on
Yes.
women.
Right.
And he's clearly like that contract feels like a selling of the soul that has short-circuited that entire fan base and franchise.
That's exactly what it is. But he's living.
That's what it is. I'm
Right.
not arguing that this team made the right decision. That's not it. I'm trying to take you into the thinking of why they were doing it, of what the thought process was. Let's put aside the mental anguish that he's been through. And it sounds sympathetic. I don't mean it to be that way. It's more, let what you just described. He's obviously struggled with life since this has happened. He is not the same player. So I called some coaches over the weekend, actually, that coached him in Houston when he was great. When we saw the Deshaun that we thought that Cleveland was trying to go after here, or at least they were expecting. And when you talk about his actual play, his football, what's wrong with him? What were you doing that Kevin Stefanski's not doing? Is that what this is? And a lot of it has to do with the relationship he had with that staff, the way they coached him, because he was in a mentally different state. So even the times where I want to make it about football and try to dig on the reporting side of how is this a mechanic thing? Is he not clicking with Stefanski? Is the playbook too difficult? Are they running too many motions? What is it? In fact, they ran tons of motion with him when he was in Houston. That helped him. They did so much of what he did in Clemson, and they combined that with what they did in New England. It is similar but different in Cleveland, but he's not the same guy. He's not the same person. And I don't know what the Cleveland Browns are going to do to find that man again. And that man may be non-existent at this point.